the million dollar question. What do you
hmm
think is the biggest mistake people make of carnivore that can completely throw off their results?
Well, there are a lot of different things that people would have, but I think the main issue is when.
Welcome to Meet the Truth. Today I'm joined by Dr. Anthony Chaffee, neurosurgeon, carnivore expert, and the voice behind Plant Free MD podcast. We're digging into the hot button questions around carnivore, from how it works on a cellular level to mental health to the number one mistake that can wreck your results. Real quick, before we dive in, I want to personally invite you to MeatSock 2026. It's happening May 2nd and 3rd in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and I'm so honored to be one of the speakers. I'll be there alongside Dr. Anthony Chaffee, Dr. Eric Berg, Michaela Peterson, Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Sean Baker, and so many other carnivore doctors and health experts. I cannot wait for this event. It's going to be an incredible weekend of learning from the best, sharing healing stories, and just having a great time together as a community. If you want to join us, use code MEATMOM for $50 off your ticket, and I hope to see you there. Dr. Chaffee, thank you so much for being here. Let's get started with the big picture. Why does the body actually thrive on a meat-only diet?
Oh, well, just put simply, it's our biologically adapted species-specific diet. All animals in the world have have a specific set of nutrient requirements and a specific set of digestional capabilities and sensitivities to various toxins and substances. And so if you don't eat the right thing, you won't get the proper nutrients, or you won't be able to extract those nutrients due to low bioavailability, and you might be confronted with harmful chemicals and toxins and things like that that plants and mushrooms especially use to defend themselves. Other things can too. I mean, you can get a poisoned toad. You need to know sort of what to eat. But this is just what humans are designed to eat. This is what humans have been eating since humans have been humans. This is actually what drove our evolution into we are today. And humans have been apex predators for over 2 million years. So that's just basic biology. This is the best way that we can eat for optimal health.
Can you explain what's happening on a cellular level when you cut plants out?
Well, I mean, there's quite a lot of things that come in plants. So different sort of toxins. So there's phytic acid, there's oxalates, there's tannins, there's lectins, there's saponins, there's protease inhibitors, other sorts of digestive disruptors that cause you to not be able to break down and absorb different vitamins and minerals. And some of those lectins, in particular, there's thousands of different kinds, but they can bind to our cells, sort of have a carbohydrate and protein structures. And so they can bind to all sorts of different antigens on the surface of our cells and cause damage. They're all agglutinins, meaning that they cause things to stick together. So things like hemagglutinin or wheat germ agglutinin, they make things stick together. And they can cause damage, cause irritation, and can cause an immune response to that, which we call autoimmunity. And this is something that's been in the medical literature since the early 90s, people arguing that all of the physiological issues that we see when someone has a so-called autoimmune disease are all satisfied by the known consequences of eating plant lectins. Some of these things can be denatured with cooking, but not all of them, and they don't all get denatured. And so people have found that especially if they have an autoimmune condition, that when they cut out all these lectins, their autoimmunity actually can resolve or reduce or even resolve and go into full remission. I have literally hundreds of patients who have put their autoimmune conditions into full remission. And we're about to publish a case series of patients who have reversed their multiple sclerosis, not only from a symptomatic point of view, some people who are bedridden or in wheelchairs and now are much more functional, if not fully functional. And not only that, on MRIs, their lesions are actually shrinking and improving and healing, which is not something that has ever been shown in the literature as far as I'm aware. So that's a major sort of breakthrough, understanding that we can actually reverse autoimmune disease. I mean, that's a massive, massive discovery. That's something that's going to help tens, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world if they choose to do this sort of thing. The other digestive disruptors, they can bind to different vitamins, minerals, proteins, fat tannins will denature proteins and prevent you from being able to break them down and absorbing them. Phytic acid will bind to different minerals. Oxalates will do the same. Saponins can disrupt our body's ability to break down foods in the first place. Even fiber can act as an anti-nutrient by blocking out up to 30% of the nutrients we have eaten. And so we just don't absorb them. They can be a physical barrier between our enzymes and the food, and then also be a physical barrier between the walls of the intestine and that digested food from absorbing. And this is why we see some benefits in certain circumstances in, say, diabetes. When people are eating a standard diet, they increase the fiber. And this could has been shown to marginally lower blood sugar levels. Well, that makes sense because if you block out 30% of the carbohydrates you eat, your blood sugar is not going to be as high. So, fun fact, you can also just eat 30% less carbohydrates, you'll get the exact same result, or don't eat carbohydrates at all, and you won't have diabetes in the first place. You can actually reverse that. And that's been proven on clinical trials in humans, showing that if you just go on a ketogenic diet, like a carnivore diet, then you can actually put type 2 diabetes into remission and come off medications, sometimes all medications, quite often all medications. So even things like carbohydrates can act as a toxin because we have a certain baseline level of blood sugar, then that's what our body really tries to keep us at. And when we go above that, it's actually quite harmful. These glucose molecules, all carbohydrate molecules, can physically fuse other molecules called glycation, and that permanently damages these molecules, cells, and structures. And so because this is going through your arteries and going through your bloodstream, it's damaging everything in your blood, like your hemoglobin, causing HbA1c, which is an advanced glycation end product, or AGEs, and of glucose and hemoglobin, but also your cholesterol, which causes SD-LDL and knocks off ApoB, and it's a marker of increased risk of cardiovascular disease. But it also damages the arteries themselves. And so this damages the blood supply all over your body. And so this damages the organs and different tissues because it damages that blood supply. This is actually the leading cause of heart disease because it damages the arteries, and that builds up plaque and damage from that damage from glycation. It damages the blood supply to your kidneys, and diabetes is the number one cause of kidney failure. It's also the number one cause of adult onset blindness. And of course, the number one cause of having your foot amputated and then your leg amputated and having all sorts of horrible other sequelae from diabetes as well. And then that raises your insulin, changes your metabolism in multiple ways, because insulin affects hundreds of different processes in your body and your brain, as well as disrupting a lot of different hormones. So in women, it will block the conversion of testosterone and estrogen. So you get too much testosterone, not enough estrogen. And that's what is the leading cause of PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is the leading cause of infertility worldwide. It is now being called, Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes because insulin resistance of the brain. Now you can't get glucose in the brain. Now our brain is getting starved for energy and starts to atrophy and shrink and not function properly. And randomized controlled trials have shown in humans that putting people on a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet, like a carnivore diet, is a better treatment for Alzheimer's than every medication ever trialed. And you go into state of ketosis, your brain starts running on these ketones, and people actually start improving within days. And then they continue to improve because their brain is getting proper nutrition, proper energy, and you're eating meat, which now has all those nutrients, because it's not just the toxins that are harmful to you, or in this case, toxic glucose causing insulin resistance, but also a lack of appropriate nutrients. Because it's quite interesting. The definition of a hypercarnivore is any animal that eats more than 70% of its calories from meat. And 80% of the calories consumed in America are actually from plants. Most of those are processed plants, carbs, sugar, things like that, but they're still plants. And so people in America are actually on a sort of a standard diet, are actually hyper vegetarians. And these plants don't have the requisite nutrients that we need, especially for our brain. So B12, you need that, or you actually get demyelination of your brain. Brain can actually shrink. Oxford showed that if your B12 is under 600, 650 in American terms, that people's brains actually shrank by 2.5% after 5 years. And under 450, people's brains actually shrank by 5.5% in 5 years. So 1.1% per year. And the lower end, what they say is normal, can go down to 200, even 150. That's such a marked deficiency that people are actually getting brain damage. So we get this age-related brain atrophy as we get older. We say, oh, well, that's just a consequence of old age. No, that's a consequence of malnutrition over time. And so you're getting the B12, but you're also getting vitamin D3. You're getting choline, creatine, carnitine, DHA, EPA, and yes, even saturated fat and cholesterol. All of these are essential for the brain. And so when you give people with Alzheimer's or any neurological issue, or just normal healthy people, all of these nutrients and requisites, their brain function can actually improve. The other thing is, a lot of these plant toxins can be just directly toxic, and they all work in various ways. We know we have classified, categorized, and named nearly 1 million different plant toxins. And most of them are so toxic that they will cause extreme harm or even death. And that's why most of the hundreds of thousands of plant species out there, about 400,000 known plant species, most of those will kill you or make you extremely sick, even if you eat a small amount of them. So these are called inedible. And of the edible plants, which are very few in number, they can still be quite harmful. They can still have toxins. Grapes and avocados we eat commonly, but we know grapes have tannins and things like that. Avocados have oxalates and other sorts of things, and many other things. We eat them quite commonly, but they're actually quite toxic to dogs and cats, and enough can actually kill dogs and cats. So we know there are toxins in there. And we know that they're toxic to us too because our body tries to detoxify them. These chemicals come in our body. They're not used for any biological process or physiological process. Our body actually tries to break it down and get it the hell out. So that's a clear toxin. Our body is treating it as a toxin. We have more defenses towards certain toxins than other animals do, and for certain things. But then other animals have much more defenses toward toxins than we do. So some of the toxins, things like North American water hemlock, that can kill you within minutes. Even half a leaf can kill an adult. Causes blockade of the GABA receptors in the brain and causes the brain to not be able to calm down the excitation in your neurons, meaning that they get overexcited and they just start firing out of control, and you just start having intractable seizures and you die within minutes and you can't stop it. Things like that. So there are many different kinds of toxins. The plants that we eat and the toxins that we eat, some of these can be very harmful. And in fact, we often eat inedible plants, but through intelligence and innovation and technology, we've figured out how to lower the toxic load. And this is where these traditional recipes come from. We know that various beans, you don't eat them raw. Some beans you can eat raw, but others are so full of harmful lectins that they can cause serious harm if you don't prepare them properly. So red kidney beans, for example, they're one of the more toxic beans in the world. People don't realize that, but they're a seed. And a seed is a plant's baby, and everything protects their babies more than anything. So this is actually generally where we find the highest concentration of toxins. So the WHO even says on their website that as little as 5 red kidney beans, uncooked or undercooked, have actually put people in the hospital with serious illness. So we soak them and then boil the hell out of them, and that lowers the toxic load. So that can sort of denature some of those lectins, but not everything is heat sensitive. So sometimes we soak them in lye, or we soak them in other chemicals or ash or clay or other sorts of things, cook them, meal them, and all these other sorts of things. And these are these traditional ways of cooking. Previously in history, people didn't commonly eat raw spinach. They felt that this was not safe to do that. And I found nutrition books from Adele Davis 100 years ago who said, yeah, you never eat raw spinach. What you do is you poach them in milk or cream, and then this can actually draw out the oxalates that are in spinach, and the calcium will bind to that from the dairy, and then that will neutralize the oxalates, and now it's safer to eat, not necessarily safe to eat. But that's how you would eat them. Now everyone's eating these things raw, which is not the way to do it. So these toxins, even the low-grade toxins or the denatured toxins or lowered toxins, they can still cause harm over time. And so these things will build up over time. So I'll take one example with almonds. And people get really shirty with me when I talk about almonds, but they have cyanide in them. It's the sweet almonds that we commonly eat are pretty low in cyanide, but the point is not eating so much that you die. The point is you're eating enough that this causes small physiological harm over time, and eventually you start building up issues. I'm not saying that almonds are as bad as smoking, but this is the same principle. If you smoke cigarettes, you don't just die that day, right? It'd be pretty bad business if people died from it that day. But over time, you build up damage. You get damage to your lungs, you get damage to your arteries, causes peripheral vascular disease because it damages the arteries just like glucose can, and damages your arteries in your heart and in your brain. You cause atherosclerosis, and it causes heart disease and damage and strokes and heart attacks and things like that. Also causes COPD. This is damage over time, over a long time, or people that drink a lot of alcohol. It damages them over time. So this is the same with other plant toxins. I think cigarettes and alcohol come from plants anyway. So these are toxins that build up over time. And so for almonds, for example, yes, you would have to eat a few pounds of almonds to start getting to the point of like an acute toxicity where you can get very sick or even die. Most people are not going to do that. Things like cassava have so much cyanide in them that if you don't treat them properly, you can die from bitter cassava. And sweet cassava, they say, well, it's not enough. It's fine. We don't need to treat it. So now you're actually leaving that cyanide there. And then bitter cassava, you can't get rid of all the cyanide. So these things build up. And the amount of cassava that people eat in the developing world and in the tropics is quite large. It's actually the number one calorie source for 750 people in the tropics. So this actually does show up in population, in population illnesses and things like that. If you have low grade exposure to cyanide over time, cyanide damages the electron transport chain in your mitochondria. It shuts down your mitochondria, and this is what can kill you if you do this to such a great extent that your mitochondria can't function. Your cells just start dying. They can't make ATP, they can't run. But low grade exposure, you're damaging your mitochondria just at a lower level. And really, do you want any cyanide? I mean, how much cyanide do you want? I want zero, thank you. I don't want any of this stuff. And so a little bit of this stuff over time can actually cause quite serious harm. So we know this is, again, WHO, CDC, all these other places. They say there's actually no safe limit or safe minimum of cyanide that you can eat. You just don't ingest cyanide. But then they say, oh, almonds are fine. I was like, well, hold on a second. But you don't even have to say something has cyanide in it if it comes from a natural source, right? It's just like you don't have to say there's nitrates in something if it's a natural source. And this is why bacon says nitrate free. And then you look on the ingredients and it says it has, powdered beetroot or powdered celery, because celery and beets have way more nitrates than bacon does, right? And so, but they don't have to say that because it's from a plant, and obviously plants are all good. So the amount of cyanide that are in almonds, if that came from like an industrial source, and this was sort of a byproduct of an industrial process, and that got into your food, they would absolutely have to have a warning label on there saying that this contains cyanide and to be careful. But because it's just a natural source, and obviously nature is wonderful and we're all in the Garden of Eden and there's nothing wrong, there's nothing harmful in this whole entire world, they don't have to say that. So as little as 35 to 40 almonds per day, eaten long-term over months and years, can cause significant damage. It also acts as a goitrogen. There's an entire category of plant toxins called goitrogens, and these cause goiters, which is a large dysfunctional thyroid. So you can't produce thyroid hormone properly. This is a leading cause of thyroid dysfunction that people don't even know about. Kale has a lot of goitrogens. Broccoli has a lot of goitrogens. All cruciferous vegetables have a lot of goitrogens, and these are these leafy green vegetables that people think are so good for you. In fact, they can cause quite serious harm and thyroid dysfunction. And almonds are the same. So they can cause a blockade of iodine. So they don't allow iodine to get into your thyroid. You need iodine to make thyroid hormone. Now you can't make thyroid hormone. So you get hypothyroid. You build this up over time, you can actually get very serious damage to your thyroid. You can get serious thyroid dysfunction and neurological dysfunction, because now the mitochondria getting dysfunctional in your brain and nervous system may actually start seeing some serious consequences of this. So as little as 35 to 40 almonds per day eaten long term can cause that, can cause thyroid and neurological dysfunction. And people say like, well, yeah, but who eats 35 or 40 almonds a day? Well, my doctor told me when I was in my 20s that I should eat 35 to 40 almonds a day to lower my cholesterol, because it has these plant sterols, which is their version of cholesterol. And that goes, we absorb that, and our liver looks at that and goes, oh, hey, we have cholesterol coming in. We don't need to make as much, and will artificially lower your cholesterol below what your body wants it to be. And so I was told, and people are being told, and doctors are even being taught, hey, tell your patients to eat 35 or 40 almonds a day. I mean, this is a mainstream recommendation this goes back 20, 30 years that I first heard about it 20 years ago. So that's exactly what you don't want to eat. And doctors don't even know that. They don't even understand that there's these toxins in there. They have no idea there's any cyanide in there, or they just trace. Who cares? Okay, but you need to know what that means. Okay, how much over time is going to cause harm? And the exact amount that they're recommending to lower cholesterol is what is going to cause long-term harm. So there's quite a lot. I have a whole lecture, it's called "Plants Are Trying to Kill You," and that's on YouTube, and I go into other things in a bit more detail. But then this is this is on the WHO website. And this is on most governmental sites have different web pages dedicated towards plant toxins that can be. A lot of these things are dedicated towards things that can kill livestock and things like that. And we recognize this in livestock that if you even have herbivores that only eat plants, if they eat the wrong plants, which are most plants on Earth, they can get very sick or they can even die. But then we just dismiss that from ourselves. And no, plants can't cause harm to people. So there are quite a lot of different things. When you stop eating plants, basically what happens is you stop exposing yourself to these harms, and albeit in some cases very low grade harm. But low grade harm over time is still harm, and some of this is actually worse than you think. And so when you stop eating these plants, you're getting rid of all these potential toxins and potential harm. And also what you're doing is you're getting rid of the anti-nutrients that are blocking the normal absorption of the nutrients that you get from meat. Now, you get everything you need in the proportion that you need them from eating meat. If you eat them with plants, that will actually disrupt the absorption. Black beans have been shown in studies to block out 75% of the absorption of zinc, and you require zinc for hormonal synthesis, such as testosterone, estrogen, and thyroid activation, converting T4 into the active form T3. You have to have zinc for that. Uh, Corn will block out 100% of the zinc absorption. And so that was shown in the same study. So when you get rid of these things, you're allowing your body to absorb all the nutrients that your body is actually, or you absorb all the nutrients that you're getting from your food. You're cutting out various toxins that have various types of harm. And not only that, you're offsetting, instead of eating these plants, what are you eating? You're eating meat, which is our optimal fuel source and optimal nutrition source. And so now you're getting enough. And so that's really important, as well, as that you're eating more meat, less toxic plants, and your body just works better. And I see this on blood tests for myself, for my patients, going back 7 years now.
I think that's so interesting, and it's something that so many more people need to hear because I had no idea about it. And a few
Mhm.
years ago, I had unknowingly a huge issue with oxalates, and I had kidney issues and joint
Yeah.
pains, and I mean, you name it, I had all of the symptoms. And so I saw a functional medicine doctor that said, "Why don't you cut back on the oxalates and see how you feel?" And I did, but this is a question that I don't know if other people would have, but I definitely have. So I was doing my own research like one does, and I kept reading, you just need to heal your gut and you can tolerate all these plants again. And you have a damaged gut and everything's leaking into your body and your immune system, and that's why it's attacking everything. And so
Mhm.
I found, the GAPS diet and meat stock, which I do make meat stock, just, collagen and, other health benefits. But what's your take on healing your gut in order to be able to tolerate these plants if you really wanna eat them, I
Yeah.
guess?
Well, I mean, certainly, yes, you do need to heal your gut, and a lot of this damage happens, and you get leaky gut and things. And normally have this. Our intestine acts as a sort of barrier protection, just like our skin, and so our intestines want to pull in nutrients but keep bad things out. And so when that's working properly, that works quite well, and so it has this barrier protection. But when it gets leaky gut, the tight bonds between the cells actually break, and now things can actually slip through the cracks between the cells. You can get your lectins in your body. Those lectins can bind to various cells in your body and cause damage, and then your body attacks that. And that's what we call autoimmunity. That's like celiac disease. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. It's called an autoimmune condition, but it's also called a gluten-mediated autoimmune condition, because if you don't have gluten, then you don't have this problem. So gluten, weak germ agglutinin, that's a lectin, and it's quite a potent lectin, and it causes your villi, which are your finger-like projections in your intestine. They have microvilli coming off of them, sticks to them, and they make them clump up. So everybody's sensitive to these things, right? And so everybody, if they eat, they say, "Oh, I think I'm a gluten intolerant." That was something that was quite annoying to people. It's like, "Oh God, everybody's gluten intolerant." Before you heard about gluten, no one was gluten intolerant, something like that. But everybody's gluten intolerant. That's like saying I'm lead intolerant. It's just like everyone's lead intolerant. It's a toxin and it's damaging you, even if you don't have that larger reaction, that immune reaction, which is celiac, because some people have this reaction. The immune system goes and attacks those things, actually damages the gut lining more, because those lectins are being attacked, and they're attached to the cells, and so they get damaged. Even if you don't have that big reaction, you're still getting the damage from agglutinating those villi and having them stick together and get damaged. And they can also cause leaky gut. And then you get this absorption of all these different sorts of things. So just quickly on the celiac thing, the interesting part about that is we call it an autoimmune condition. But when you stop eating gluten on biopsies, it's been shown that your gut can completely heal within 4 to 6 weeks after you get rid of the gluten, even though the antibodies for celiac stay elevated for upwards of 3 years after your last exposure to gluten. So that's not an autoimmune condition. That's not the body attacking itself. Those are not autoantibodies. Your body's attacking the lectins because lectins are attacking your body. Body's attacking the lectins. Now you get leaky gut. Now all of a sudden, those lectins and bacteria and glyphosates and other sorts of things can get in your body, and now they can attack your body, and then your body attacks them. And we call these autoimmune. And because we've labeled them autoimmune, now no one's looking for anything else. We're just looking at how to modulate the immune system because someone's immune system is going crazy. But the fact of the matter is that autoimmune conditions have increased exponentially over the last 40 years. And so why are we saying that this is just purely genetic? Some people get it, some people don't. Why is it that animals in the wild don't get autoimmune conditions? Why is it that animals in the zoo, when fed their proper diet, don't get autoimmune conditions, but dogs and cats fed kibble and garbage do? Plants that they're not supposed to eat. I mean, dogs and cats are known carnivores, and yet we feed them kibble and plant-based garbage because it's cheap and it's filler and it comes from these processed food industry like Mars. Like Mars bars, they own most of the pet food industry. They have a big market share in that. And they just put out crap, cheap garbage that yes, technically has the nutrients that these animals require, but also come with a lot of other filler garbage that is not good for them. And now vets are even being told, yes, you should give your dog broccoli and vegetables, and don't give them meat because they like that too much. If they ever get sick, then use the meat to put a pill in it or something like that. If meat's good and they like it so much, why wouldn't you just feed them meat and then maybe they don't get sick? That's a bad vet who gives you that advice. But when you talk about fixing the leaky gut, yes, when your leaky gut's fixed and your gut damage is healed, then you will have more of a barrier protection. But the plants are what caused the damage in the first place. So if you go back, then you're just going to start that process of damage again, and you're going to be back to square one. And so we see this with people with autoimmunity all the time. It would be nice if they could go back. And maybe some people sort of dabble in, and for a time it's okay. But once they start building up more damage and they start getting that leaky gut again, these things start coming into their body again. They build up a critical mass of damage. Bam, they are back and in trouble. And I see a lot of people do that where they feel confident in how they're doing. They've come off their medication. They're in complete remission. They say, well, maybe I can have a little bit of this, and maybe I can go out drinking with my friends, and maybe I can do this, and maybe I can do that. And that works for a time. And then all of a sudden they have this massive resurgence of their autoimmune condition. And sometimes it can take a long time to get through that. So when people talk about that and they say, well, once you heal the damage, then you can go back to eating all the things that cause the damage. I mean, that's like saying, well, once you cure your lead poisoning, you can go back to drinking lead, then it's fine. Or with people who are metabolically healthy, it's okay for them to have sugar and carbs. It's the sugar and carbs that cause the metabolic dysfunction in the first place. So yes, you can do that. Yes, you can get away with it for a time, but it is what's causing the damage. And it will build up over time. And then you will be back to where you started from again. So a lot of people just don't want to do that. And then people with like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, they just have no interest in that. And if they eat something off plan, all of a sudden they have bloody diarrhea for 3 days. They're just like, absolutely not. Keep all that the hell away from me. And that's sort of how I feel as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for explaining that,
Mhm.
and also in a way that people understand, because sometimes it's really sciencey, but I definitely understood that. So thank you.
Okay, good.
Here is the million-dollar question. What do you
Mhm.
think is the biggest mistake people make on carnivore that can completely throw off their results?
Well, there are a lot of different things that people have, but I think the main issue is when people are just actually not doing carnivore and not just eating meat and only drinking water. They'll eat a lot of meat and they'll cut down on a lot of other things. But that's not what we're talking about here. It's not just about eating more meat. Yes, that's great. That's where you're getting all your nutrients from. That's necessary. But the main idea here is you're eliminating things that cause harm. And if you don't eliminate those things, then you're going to still get a bit of harm. And maybe you get a lot of improvements, but maybe they're not as much as you were expecting. And people say, well, I'm not really losing weight, or I'm not doing this or this and this. Even though I've come off my medications and I've stopped my blood pressure medication, my autoimmune medication, and all these other things are improving, I just can't lose weight or something like that. So I guess carnivore didn't work for me. And to me, that sounds like it was working. Um, but they're focused on their main reason for going carnivore. Take weight for example. I see commonly people that are trying to lose weight. They can be metabolically dysfunctional, and that can actually take time for the metabolism to normalize. And we can track this with blood markers, tracking fasting insulin, leptin, blood sugar, things like that. There are different ways that you can look at this and say, okay, well, what's happening here? And you can actually track it. And it's getting better and better and better, and these markers are going down. But what if people just really aren't losing weight? Their metabolism isn't all screwed up or whatever, or they're just confused. Maybe they haven't checked that and they don't know. So that aside, you have to sort of look at, okay, what else are they eating? Quite often, I'll talk to people and they'll still include things like artificial sweeteners or stevia or other sorts of things like that. And those can actually trigger insulin. And insulin is the fat storage hormone that prevents you from burning fat. Another one is dairy, especially if people are trying to lose weight. Dairy can be a major stall because if you're drinking milk, it has carbohydrates in it. That again will raise your insulin. I've tracked this and measured this. It absolutely will raise your insulin. And it also has casomorphines, which are metabolites of casein, the proteins, and you get sort of different metabolites with A1 versus A2. So that there's a difference there too. But those casomorphines, like what they sound like, casomorphines, they can act on our natural opioid receptors, and they can cause all sorts of different issues like compulsive eating. They can have a sort of a compulsive addictive nature to them. And so you might find that you eat meat until you're like, no, I don't want any more. And then you just start eating cheese, and you can just eat a couple bricks of cheese and drink a whole bunch of milk and not be a problem, because there's this compulsive nature to it, because it's telling you to eat more, eat more, eat more. And that's important when you're a baby and you're trying to grow. And it also tells your body to stimulate to grow as well, because babies are vulnerable. And so if you have a breastfeeding baby, or any mammal in the wild, they're the most vulnerable. And so it's really important to have them grow as fast as possible. And that's part of what the casomorphines, and I would imagine the carbohydrates raising insulin and causing more of a hunger reaction do as well. It can also contribute to autoimmunity. Even casein itself can actually damage the gut lining and cause leaky gut, unfortunately. So a lot of people with autoimmune issues have real trouble with milk products of any description. And so they just need to be careful. Now, maybe some people get away with it, or maybe things that have more of those milk solids taken out, like butter or ghee in particular. But a lot of people have problems. Now, is there a difference between raw and A2 versus A1? Probably. But most people still have a problem with autoimmune conditions with any sort of milk product.
That makes a lot of sense. I am very lactose intolerant, so I can't even handle
Mhm.
ghee or anything, and it causes flare-ups for me, so I just stay
Mhm.
away.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, and that's well, I was just gonna say, and that's the thing, if you're ever having a problem, or you're not quite getting the results that you want, think about it. Are you exclusively eating meat and water, fatty meat and water? That's another one. Yeah, that'd be probably number two, people under eating fat, not eating enough. Are you eating fatty meat? Are you eating enough fat? Are you only drinking water? Are you eating or drinking anything else whatsoever? If you are, cut them out.
Mm.
Just go back to the baseline, just meat and water, especially if autoimmune issues, or anybody, if you want to get best results, just ruminant animals, beef, lamb, and water, goat, venison, ruminant animals. Get down to brass tacks, just cut down to red meat and water, and then go from there. And if you're still having problems, then you can look elsewhere. But the vast majority of people that are having issues, if you just cut down to only meat and water, and especially only red meat and water, that usually resolves things for most people.
Okay, so this one's personal for me again. I had severe anxiety for, years, and after 30 days on the carnivore diet, it was completely gone. I had no
Nice.
speck of anxiety. It was amazing.
Very
So,
good.
thank you. Why do you think carnivore has such a powerful impact on mental health, especially anxiety and depression?
Well, there are studies that are looking into that, and they've found that in clinical trials in humans, that just ketogenic diets generally will actually start improving mental health, and not only anxiety and depression, but also things like OCD, bipolar, and even schizophrenia. And they're doing larger studies at the moment in Harvard. I believe they've already started publishing some of their data. But there are many theories on this. Prevailing theory is that mitochondrial function in the brain is very much a part of this. And this is actually going back 20 years or so in the literature, that there are studies showing that things like schizophrenia and other mental health issues, major mental health issues, that these have all been tied to damaged mitochondria. I mean, mitochondria don't just generate energy in the cells, they control the cells and actually move around in the cells, turning things off, yes, by generating ATP, energy. But they do it in a very controlled, specific fashion. It's not just dumping out energy and as everything's happening at the same time. Things are being turned on, they're being turned off by the mitochondria. And so they're sort of using these different receptors and machines as machines to sort of, run this sort of ship, if you will. They can actually move into your bloodstream. They can travel around your body. They can go between cells and things like that. So almost like their own organism. And yes, mitochondria actually were organisms, separate organism, now sort of form this symbiotic relationship. They were sort of thought to be sort of very primitive sort of bacteria, and they sort of came in and melded and became sort of a symbiotic relationship. But they don't just stay in the cells; they actually move between cells and through the blood supply and all these other sorts of things. Insulin, again, does hundreds of different things. One of the things it does is it blocks autophagy. Autophagy allows your body to break down and recycle old damaged cells, precancerous cells that aren't working properly, but also the internal organelles, the internal working constituents of those cells. And just like if you had a bad fuel line in your car, you wouldn't just throw away your car and scrap it and make a new one. You could just replace a fuel line. So if you have damaged mitochondria, going through autophagy can just replace those. It's called mitophagy. And then you make more mitochondria. It's called mitogenesis. Insulin blocks that and prevents your body from doing that. So people think you have to fast for 5 days every 3 months in order to stimulate your mitochondria and sort of stimulate autophagy. You don't have to do that. You just have to stop eating carbs. And then your insulin will come down and everything will take care of itself. This is a normal background housekeeping process that would normally be happening if we were eating our biologically appropriate diet, which again shows that this is our biologically appropriate diet. And when you start improving the mitochondrial function, the brain starts working better. Your cells start working better. All your organs start working better. And they found that after several weeks on a ketogenic diet, you're going to start improving your mitochondria. You're going to start improving your neurological health, and people's mental health issues start to improve dramatically. I think it's more than that, though. There are a lot of things that play in this as well. When you're in ketosis, your brain can run on ketones, and those ketones are actually your brain's primary and optimal fuel source. Why do I say that when almost everybody says you have to have glucose for your brain? You don't actually. There are parts of your brain that will still run on glucose, but the vast majority of your brain runs on ketones if there are ketones available. The problem is just eating carbohydrates suppresses the formation of ketones, so no one's making ketones. And so, of course, your brain's not running on ketones when there's no ketones available. But if you take exogenous ketones and take a drink that has ketones in it, and your ketone levels goes up, your brain and your heart and your intestines and your muscles and most tissue in your body will only run on those ketones until they're gone. And then it will go back to the glucose. So that's a preference. Your brain prefers that. And when you're in ketosis and you're making ketones and you're making glucose, you have perfect glucose level, and now you have an optimal ketone level, your brain only runs on those ketones, even though there's glucose available. So again, that's a preference. And your brain works better on ketones as well. So the brain starts turning on, it starts functioning better as well. The mitochondria start functioning better because that's a better fuel for your mitochondria as well. So even before you replace and swap out your mitochondria, there are studies that show that after 3 months on a ketogenic diet, you have 4 times the number of mitochondria, and they are 4 times as effective because of this process of autophagy and mitophagy. Long before that, now that's happening along the way, but long before that, just running on ketones is a more optimal fuel source for your mitochondria. So wherever they're at now, they will work better. Another reason is that ketones stimulate something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is actually like fertilizer for your brain and causes new neurons to grow, new synapses and connections to grow, and for your brain to actually physically heal. I've seen so many people go on ketogenic diets and improve dramatically from a mental health point of view. And I've also seen people with very severe anxiety, depression, mental health issues, psychiatric issues that improve, but still have some seriously debilitating issues. And it's not until they remove the vegetables as well that they then have full sort of resolution of their issues. Jordan Peterson famously said that he was doing a ketogenic diet, just eating big steaks and salads, but it helped so many of his health issues, but he still had this crippling anxiety to the point that sometimes he couldn't get out of bed and face his day. And just coming off of salads for 3 weeks, he found the same thing, that his anxiety largely went away. And he sort of just looked at this and said, "Salad was doing this to me?" He was sort of, appalled by that. But I've seen that as well. I've seen that in myself. I've seen when I've sort of reintroduced, not I'd never reintroduced it, but if they sort of mixed in, if it was like a meat dish, but it had some seasonings or spices and cilantro and whatever, like mixed in with like a meatball or something like that, and I would eat that, like I would actually get quite severely depressed and wouldn't know why. And then I sort of thought about it. I was like, was that the stupid meatball that was doing that, or the lamb that had all this sort of leaves packed on it? And I was like, okay, only one way to find it, because the next day I felt fine. And then I said, okay, well, only one way to find out is to try eating it again. And I had, whatever that was with the plants in it again. And I was, depressed again, but I knew why now. And so it didn't affect me negatively. I was just in a bad mood. So I just sort of separated myself from people. And was like, okay, I'm just going to wait for this to go away. And now I'm just more reaffirmed that I am never eating that garbage again, because whether or not my gut's healed or not, if it's going to make me feel like that, not a chance in hell that I'm going to eat it. So I think there are neurotoxic elements in plants that are going to contribute to that. What they are, I don't know, but there are a lot of these toxins that are absolutely neuroactive. I mean, caffeine, for example. I'm not saying this is necessarily a cause, but it's just to illustrate a point that caffeine is actually a neurotoxin and an insecticide that plants have created millions of years ago to fry the brains of insects trying to eat them. And so this is absolutely neuroactive. And I know people that have reversed epilepsy with ketogenic and carnivore diets. And actually, that was why the ketogenic diet was called the ketogenic diet, was invented, was to treat epilepsy, especially kids with epilepsy, and then on into adulthood as well. But we've been using ketogenic diets. They just not called by that name since the late 1700s to treat diabetes. That was the treatment for diabetes. Even in medical textbooks from 1910 from Sir William Osler of Johns Hopkins, I have his book. It was my great-grandfather's, who was a doctor. There's a chapter on diabetes, and that is the treatment. You cut out carbs completely, and you eat equal parts grams of protein and fat. And that's it. And called like an animal diet, animal-based diet, things like that. So ketogenic diets have been used for epilepsy. Then we had pharmacology, and just it's easier just to prescribe someone a pill and not have to talk to them about not eating bread. Okay, I think it's a lot easier to just say, hey, by the way, we have 100 years of evidence showing that if you cut out carbs, your child's seizures will improve, or can likely improve. Because when I say it like that, it's one sentence, parents just go, oh, wow, hi, I didn't know that. Yeah, we'll try that. Thank you. It's so easy. It does not take that long. That it's not that hard. And especially when parents have a kid with seizures, or they have seizures, they are absolutely willing to do what it takes to stop having seizures. These things are scary as hell, and they can kill you, and they can kill their child. So of course they're gonna try something like that. So I've had conversations with people who have, put their epilepsy into remission by going carnivore, improved it by going keto, and then completely resolved their issues by going carnivore, and were able to come off medication safely without any negative side effects or seizures. And I had a cup of coffee, and bam, dropped and had a seizure. So there are neuroactive chemicals in plants, is the point of that. And they can cause more issues than you imagine. And I would be willing to bet that some of these will absolutely trigger depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. And so I think it's one step beyond a ketogenic diet in improving mental health. And that's what I've seen in my own self, as well as in my clinical practice.
There's so many incredible stories that I've heard about people healing just by eating meat,
Yeah.
and I mean, I'm one personally, but what's one healing story you've seen on carnivore that would make, like, the most skeptical person or doctor question everything?
I mean, yeah, you're right. There are quite a lot. I mean, I've had 6 women come out of menopause in their mid-50s, started making estrogen again, became fertile, started having periods again, which actually they weren't thrilled about. They're like, I thought I was done with this. But it's a clear demonstration that their bodies are literally aging backwards. I've seen men in their 70s triple their testosterone, have that of a 25-year-old. and just have a new lease on life, because it's not just testosterone going up. We're not replacing that. It's testosterone going up because everything's going up and they're just getting healthier. And, he came in just bouncing off the wall saying, like, I just feel amazing. All I want to do is work out and have sex with my wife. It's amazing. It's like this guy's in his 70s. It's like, well, that's great. But I think probably one that sort of jumps to mind that was just pretty remarkable was a patient of mine that had multiple sclerosis, and she was extremely unwell. It was very difficult for her to even walk, and she came on a carnivore diet. We discussed this, and she was all for it. And again, if lectins and these toxins are damaging your body, and then your body's responding, then removing these toxins should actually be a cure. Should be, right? Because you're addressing the underlying root cause. And if you remove the root cause, problem is gone. So it's not that this is curing a disease. This is just preventing damage. And so the cure for lead poisoning is not some pill. It's stopping you from eating lead. So the same thing applies here. And if you're being exposed to something that's causing harm, you remove that something and the harm goes away and the body gets to heal. But again, nobody addresses all the nutrients that you need to regrow your brain, like the B12, the D3, the choline, the creatine, the carnitine, the DHA, EPA, saturated fat, cholesterol, and there's more. There's a lot more, but those are major ones. And so I did. And I just said, hey, look, eat a lot of meat, eat a lot of fat, cut out everything else. You cut out everything else that stops the damage, and then we'll get you all these nutrients to regrow. And she did, and she was doing very well. Well enough to the point that she wanted to come off her medication. She went to her neurologist and said, look, I'm doing this thing called the carnivore diet. It's been helping a lot of people with autoimmune issues. I feel great. And I feel great to the point that I want to come off my medication. I want to try coming off. And he was beside himself. He was like, absolutely not. This is gonna, he said that you are being reckless with your health, and you are going to end up in a wheelchair, and you're going to die if you do this. And he was very upsetting to her. She left there in tears. It was not very good bedside manner. And that actually made her think, like, no, I'm going to do this. I know my body. I know I'm feeling good. And, all that you've been giving to me has only gotten me steadily worse. I'm going to try something better. This is the only thing that's actually making me feel better. And so she stopped her meds. And 8 months later, she's doing great on a carnivore diet. And she gets an MRI, goes back to her neurologist, and neurologist said that her lesions had actually shrunk by 40% in 8 months off her medications. And he said, I don't know how this happened. I've never even heard of this. I've never seen this happen. I've never heard of this happening. I can't explain this. I have no idea why this happened. And she said, well, do you think it might be that carnivore diet I told you about? Because I didn't change anything else. And absolutely not. And it's like, so that unfortunately didn't bring him around. But everybody else hearing that story was just like, tell me more about this. And especially when that happens again and again and again and again, as a neurologist, as any clinician, if you see someone, you see objective evidence where someone's improving dramatically on something that is not supposed to get better. Because as far as I know, there's nowhere in the literature that has shown that anybody has ever reduced their lesions, and certainly not by that amount in only 8 months. And so I haven't seen any published case reports, even not even one single case. Now, there might be something out there. There's a lot of stuff out in the literature, but I haven't been able to find one. And so this is very novel. And so for him to see something that has never reversed, it's his own patient, so he knows damn well that this is a real diagnosis, right? It's not some people say, wow, it probably wasn't MS in the first place. It was probably something else. And I'm like, well, no, it absolutely was MS. It was confirmed MS. And he knew that. And so there wasn't any sort of denial that could happen. He knew that she had MS, and he knew that this reversed. But when that happens, you should look at that and be like, okay, I need to find out more about what you're doing. You did something different to what I've ever seen, and you got different results than I've ever seen. Okay, we need to talk about this. But unfortunately, he was a bit too close-minded. But those sorts of things really impress me, because those are diseases that are currently thought to be incurable and will never get better. They're only progressive. They will only get worse. And yet now people are getting better, and they're actually reversing their disease and in healing the neurons and the axons, because it's a demyelinating disease. It damages the lining for your nerve cells and your brain cells. And it sort of makes sense, because if people are hyper vegetarians and plants don't have all these requisite nutrients that only come from meat, and you don't even have enough. If you have B12, under that, sort of 650, 700, you'll get demyelination. This will actually damage the myelination. How are you supposed to rebuild your myelination, your myelin sheath, if your B12 is at such a level that you're actually getting more damage? It's not possible. So understanding that, understanding, you mentioned functional medicine, we use different reference ranges. We just say, okay, well, the average is no good because the average is a bunch of sick vegetarians. So that's not what we want. What about optimal? What are reference ranges that show that, like, this is what is a range that shows good health and optimal health? Those are very different. They're very different. And so when you optimize people towards that, then your body can actually heal. And you don't have to, like, take massive amounts of supplements. Like, early on, if you're very deficient, sure, or just eat more organs or something like that. But long term, I mean, this catches up. And my blood levels, and it's interesting because they say that these are found through studies to be optimal levels of vitamins and minerals and things like that. And they are just exactly what my blood levels are, just eating fatty meat every day and not eating anything else. And you just check these things. I'm just in that optimal range for every single one of these things. So you don't go too high, you don't go too low. And, and there can be some variation in that if you're not having high quality meat, or maybe you need a bit of organs, or the soil in that area that the cow was raised on wasn't very good and things like that. But generally, well, across the board, people's nutrients go up, they improve. And generally they improve to the point of optimal levels. And so again, that's another tick in the box of, this is our optimal diet because it's getting us optimal nutrition levels as well.
It's amazing what simplifying everything can do, just paring it all back, cutting everything out, and just eating what you need, what we're intended to eat, and just seeing what happens. It's incredible. For someone that wants to start carnivore tomorrow, whether it's to heal their chronic illness, to manage anxiety, or just get healthier, what's one piece of advice you would give them to set them up for success?
Well, I think that they should try to immerse themselves in a lot of videos and things like that. I mean, this is nice to give you an idea about, well, maybe this couldn't help me, but watching other ones that go into more in depth. If you have autoimmune issues, for example, I have videos talking about, calling out rethinking autoimmune disease and the real cause of autoimmune disease and all these other sorts of things. I have a whole playlist on autoimmune disease on my YouTube channel. Immerse yourself in that. Understand why you're doing this and why it's a good idea. Watch The Plants Are Trying to Kill You. Watch a video on why we are carnivores and things like that. And really get a good reason why you're doing this, and really understanding what the main reasons why people would do this are. Because if you have a good reason why, how becomes very easy. And then there are videos on how. And so, watch those and learn from others, who've made these mistakes, and learn from them, and trying to pass those on to other people. A lot of people have these videos. I've got tons of them. And there's a whole video playlist called Getting Started on a Carnivore Diet that has basically ones on why to do it and also ones on how to do it. Carnivore for beginners, things like that. Fiber, constipation, and diet, frequently asked questions, those sorts of things. And set yourself up for success. Understand going into this what this means. It's, you just eat fatty meat. You only drink water. Cut everything else out if you want best results. If somebody can't quite do that, fine, wean down, but have a set scheduled time frame when you do that. Like every Friday, you're cutting something out. Okay, we're cutting out junk food this Friday. Next week, we're cutting out carbs and sugar. Next week, we're cutting out oxalates, and next week we're cutting out nightshades. And then at a certain point, you just have to say, okay, and today is the last day that I have anything besides meat and water. And you have that marked on your calendar, and you do it, because otherwise you're not going to do it. You're going to be like those people that are cutting down smokings and quitting smoking for the next 20 years. And it just never happens, right? So you need to have a timeline. You can also get involved in different groups. I think that's very important as well. So you don't feel like an outcast. You don't feel like just someone weird, and you have people, oh, wait, hold on a second. What about cholesterol? You're going to kill yourself without fiber. Oh my God, all that sort of stuff. Watch those videos on why that's not an issue, and actually why it's better to go the opposite of what people have recommended. And also join a group. There are plenty of groups out there that can help you along the way, sort of coach you along the way, coaching groups, things like that. But you don't even need that. You don't have to pay for anything. There are tons of carnivore groups on Facebook that have been going on for decades. I mean, things like the older ones I really like as well, because they know how to get results, which is, you be strict. You just eat meat. You only drink water. A lot of them don't even use salt. I don't use salt anymore just because doesn't taste good to me anymore. I just like the taste of meat. It tastes salted. It tastes how salted meat used to taste to me. Now, if I salt it, it's just like, whoa, way too much salt. I just don't like that, right? But that changed over time. At first, I just dumped salt on it. So you see like early videos of me preparing steaks, it was just pouring salt on this stuff. So, but that just changed. My taste changed. And so when you go to those things like zeroing in on health or zero carb health, those are two great ones. And the people that run them have been doing carnivore for like over 20 years, and they've learned from people they've been doing for 50 years. And so there are so many people there. People have asked so many questions. You can search through there and you can find basically answers to almost any question. You're a part of a community now. You're talking to people. There are local ones. There's like even here in Perth, which is the back beyond in Australia. There's a Facebook group called Perth Carnivores. And there's probably one in your area too. And so join something like that and try to be around people that are doing this as well, that can encourage you to say, hey, look, I was going through the same thing you are. This is what I had. These are the results I had. This is how I improved. These are the things to watch out for, etc. That can really help too, because most people are going to get a lot of weird looks and questions from people, or people thinking flat out that they're going to kill themselves and this is dangerous and they're being stupid. And it's a lot harder to deal with that. Or you go to your doctor and you're feeling so much better. You're reverse your diabetes. You've lost 40 pounds. Your autoimmune meds are not needed anymore. And all of a sudden they go, oh my God, your cholesterol's gone up. You need to stop this immediately. It's just like, okay, what? Like, what are you talking about? You want me to go back to being diabetic with rheumatoid arthritis and obese and contemplating suicide? Like, sounds great. Sounds like a great idea. But you might get a heart attack. It's like, well, first of all, no, you won't. And not from the cholesterol anyway. You could still get a heart attack from other reasons, not cholesterol. But first of all, diabetes is the number one cause of heart disease. So why are people saying that, hey, this reversed your diabetes, but you need to go back to being diabetic so that the cholesterol doesn't cause a heart attack? I mean, that's cognitive dissonance. I mean, you're not getting that. You've improved your risk factors across the board and improved your health across the board, and yet, oh my God, the cholesterol. Well, everything else is improving. Why aren't we calling that rise in cholesterol an improvement? I think it is. And in fact, all the large population studies with 12 million people, et cetera, show that actually higher LDL and higher cholesterol is associated with longevity. People live longer, have better health, and less heart attacks and strokes, and so on. And there's randomized controlled trials that show that too, like the Minnesota coronary experiment. So I would just arm yourself. Arm yourself with the facts. Understand why you're doing this so that you can weather the storm if you have it. Sometimes you don't have that. When I have people ask me questions, I look at it as coming from a place of curiosity, like, oh wait, but aren't you going to do this? I mean, they're curious because they're blown away by this. It's just like, I'm happy to talk to them about it. So you can look at that that way as well. But having a sense of, I knew for a fact how toxic these things were, because I had done it and gone off it and then come back to it, I knew for a fact how this affected me and how negatively plants affected me. And so there was just not a chance that I was going to go back. There's no amount of social pressure that would ever, or professional pressure that would ever have put me back to eating something that I know causes me harm. It's just, there's not a chance in hell. Not everybody has that same resolve or understanding about how toxic these things are. And so it's a bit more difficult. So surround yourself by other people, learn from them, talk to them, be part of a community, and then just, lead by example and show others that this is possible to reverse these diseases and improve your health. And as your health improves dramatically, you're going to start getting people not challenging you, saying you're going to die of a heart attack, but aren't you going to die of a heart attack? Isn't that a question? Because now they're curious because they see the benefits you're getting. They want that for themselves, but they're a bit worried because they're like, okay, well, look, I want to lose weight and I want to get better, but I don't want to, get a massive heart attack. Tell me about that. Right. And so they're ready and they're willing to listen, but they need that education. So learn the answers, learn the arguments, understand the science, understand the physiology. It's all laid out there. Many people better than I have laid this stuff out, and I've laid it out too and tried to sort of give my 2 cents as well. So that's probably a longer answer than you wanted, but I think that's what I would recommend for people.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's what I did and what many other people I know did. And that was really helpful in our success, is being connected with other people that were doing the same thing or that have done it before and could answer our questions. and watching videos like yours, I also did the same thing, and I thought that was really
Mhm.
helpful. So thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, you're very
Well, Dr.
welcome.
Chaffee, thank you so much for breaking this all down and sharing exactly why carnivore works in a way that we can easily understand. We so appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me on.
And thank you for tuning in to Meet the Truth. We've got new interviews with top carnivore doctors and health experts coming soon, where we'll be tackling myths, breaking down the science, and keeping it simple. Hit the like button, tap subscribe, and jump into the comments. I'd love to hear your takeaways or your own healing stories. And thanks for hanging out with me. We'll see you next time.